So now we're going to just kind of compare the two of them just to help you solidify some of the difference between quantitative and qualitative. So of course, hopefully everybody would be having a nice cup of cappuccino right now, and I may have to buy everybody cappuccino next week just to make up for the confusion about this week's class. I'm actually now having to do this YouTube video of the course because I couldn't get the VoiceOver PowerPoint to upload. So anyways, I could use a nice espresso right now. But anyways, this is the best way I could figure to do it to get it to upload. So your qualitative data would be looking at those characteristics that are talking about the quality, that are very descriptive, like it's got a robust aroma, frothy appearance, it's got a strong taste. Those are more you qualify, you can't really quantify. Where quantitative data is like, okay, how much? It's 12 ounces, it's at a temperature of such and such, it's, the cup is this big and this high, it costs this amount of money. So you get your real numbers and data that you can compare and look at, together. If you were doing like 10 different, Starbucks to compare if they had the same qualitative and quantitative. And again, the qualitative you can see would be the different people's interpretation of what the robust aroma is and what, the appearance is like. Whereas 12 ounces is 12 ounces. There really isn't going to be much difference, in opinion according to that. Okay, so let's have cappuccino. Okay, going on with some of those main differences, then, data that is in a quantitative research appears in the forms of numbers and specific measurements, and qualitative is in the form of words, images, could be, we were going to write the transcript, so it will be in the written word after we take what we hear in an interview or focus group or something like that and write it down. So research findings in quantitative can be illustrated in the forms of tables and graphs and pie charts where you can get that kind of visualization of the numbers, whereas qualitative is usually a narrative description or analysis using words. So that's, some of the differences there. Now quantitative tests the hypotheses that the research begins with. So that's going to be, you know, I will this is bigger than that, or we're going to have greater results with this. It's more of a comparison. Concepts in the form of distinct variables and data is in the form of numbers, from precise measuring. Okay, now qualitative is a little bit different, where it really wants to capture the essence of what somebody is describing about something, and the researcher is more immersed in what it is that they are looking at. Concepts are, really cannot be generalized from population to population. Okay, there are measures that are created, but they are not really specific, and there is much more manipulation that can be done as far as who is in the study. Sometimes you pick your participants based on what it is that you're looking at because you want to get people that know about it and get what their meetings is. So let's see, data in the form of words we talked about, documents, observations, transcripts. So your measurements are more, made and not as specific as you would find out in more type tools of a measuring cup or something specific like that. They're more related to the individual setting, or researcher. Okay, we're continuing on with these main differences. Quantitative theory is cause and usually is a deductive type quality. The procedures are more standards. It's assumed that there's going to be replication of that study. Analysis proceeds by using those statistics and tables or charts and discussing, how they show, what they show relates to the hypotheses. Again, qualitative theory can be causal, like people's interpretation of this, if this is causing that, but it also can be non-causal, and instead of being deductive, it is also it is often inductive. It's very rare to replicate exactly a qualitative study because, again, it's that very individualized, participants and the relationship between the researcher and exactly how the questions are answered. So there's going to be a lot of variables. So to duplicate, you can do something similar, but it won't be really duplicative. And the analysis proceeds by extracting those themes, what things keep coming up. So that would make one think that that's something that may happen again. So you really organize the data from, finding out those kinds of themes, um, and seeing if others are going to find that that's kind of relevant to what they look at and has a lot of similarities, and they can kind of look at it and see, wow, I want to see if that would work out. Or as more and more studies are done that are similar, more inferences can be made. And just some more of those differences. I think I really was getting into the differences. This is probably why I couldn't upload it. It was so big. Anyways, quantitative research measures your objective facts, very objective data, focusing on those variables, what's your independent variable, what's your dependent variable. There is no independent or dependent variable in qualitative research. The reliability is key, that any tools or measurement things are proven to be reliable, so that you can't like design a tool and expect it to be totally reliable. You'd have to have it checked out, that it's value free. It's really independent of the context. It's just what it is. And you need, the more you have of subjects, the better the power is going to be. It's based on a statistical analysis that you usually have a program do. And the researcher is detached from the actual research and subject, whereas qualitative, we're looking at reality and cultural meanings and interactive processes, and it's very authentic. What's real values are present and explicit. It is very situationally constrained to that time and place. We look for those themes, and the researchers is involved, with the participants or subjects. And although it has to be careful that they do not inject their own bias, but that there is a relationship there between the researcher, just in the interactions that they will have. So this is a table that really just kind of looks at some of those quantitative and qualitative, axioms. You can see the positive paradigm is considered the quantitative, and the paradigm for the qualitative is considered a naturalist. So you will see that, in the different courses and readings. So the nature of reality with a quantitative is single, tangible, and very fragmentable, whereas realities in qualitative are multiple, constructed, and holistic. They don't always going to be the same to each person, each subject. The relationship of knower to the known, well, you can see positive, they're very independent and separate, whereas in the qualitative, they're interactive and inseparable. Generalization in quantitative, you can generalize to the public if you have time and context free studies and random samples, and others are qualitative. You cannot do that. It's very just to that time and place and context. And causal linkage, positive, you do cause them, and naturalists, are in state of mutual simultaneous shaping, so that there's no way to distinguish from cause and effect. It's very circular. So there are those differences. And with quantitative, it is very value free, whereas in the qualitative, the inquiry can be value bound about on what beliefs are, and you can actually choose people based on that to be in your study. Phase one of doing a research study would be, initiating the study, where you would want to identify the question. You would want to review the literature and see what's written about what you're, the same question, or things that are very related to that question that could have an influence, on what you're looking at. So you really want to truly immerse yourself into that subject. And you want to look at what theoretical framework that you would like to study it on. If you're going to, like, let's say we're going to look at from novice to beginners and see, what their advances are, what their concerns are, or how many errors are made if you want to do quantitative. So, that kind of thing would help you, define what it is you're doing. So then we're moving into phase two, which is actually designing the research study. So again, based on what your question is, what's the best methodology that you're going to use? Again, if it's anything to do with numbers, or findings out about infection, number of things, how many people break their leg when they fall down, whatever. You pick your methodology. If you want to know about feelings and perceptions, then you would do qualitative. Selecting the sample is going to be important. Again, it's very hard to find a true random sampling, because usually it has to be some type of convenience based on where you are and who's available to be in your study. But the fact that you randomly put them into the experimental group or the control group would be really important. Whereas in qualitative, sometimes you deliberately go for specific people that you want to find, the answers from. So it's very different. And then what kind of tools are you going to use? Are you going to use survey questions, or are you going to use, a blood pressure? You're going to check everybody's blood pressure and, write them in that respect, or collect some data about numbers of incidences and things like that. So, and how many times has that tool been used before, and is it reliable in that respect? Or is it just particularly made for that particular study? And if so, how are you really, you'd have to show how you value that there's good validity in it. Or if it's just some, questions, why you pick those interview questions, because that would not necessarily have been tested before. So again, collecting the data. Oh, I have the wrong thing up here, and I'm not going back to correct it now because it's taken me long enough to get this up here for you. But data collection is going to be really important. So it really is going to depend upon what your tools are, whether you're using, some kind of measurement, or whether you're using questionnaires, or, you can also use observations if it's qualitative. And again, you could do both. You could be collecting data and using observations and surveys and focus groups and things like that. So you're finding that there is a lot more mix to that triangulated method, where you're taking some quantitative and some qualitative, and because the qualitative will really, give you more meaning to some of the numbers, and as far as why you're getting higher numbers. If you're taking people's blood pressures when they go into the doctors, and then you're asking them, how does it, what do you feel when you come in the doctor? Does it increase your anxiety? You may be doing some anxiety measures, which can quantify some data, but then you also want to get the person's feeling about it, because the quantifying of blood pressure going up may have nothing to do with what the patient's feeling. They may have forgotten to take their blood pressure medicine that morning. So I mean, that's why there's a lot of different variables you have to look into. Okay, so the more phases, well, phase 3, collecting data, is what I just talked about. Then phase 4 would be analyzing that data. What does it mean? Again, if it's going to be numbers, tables, you can run statistical things to see if there's differences in the means, and where it floats with the general population. Whereas qualitative, you're going to look for those themes that keep being repeated. Then the 5th phase would be interpreting those findings. What do they actually mean, comparing it to what the literature had said and what their findings were. Are you finding things that are similar or different, or are there gaps in the literature? Again, what are your findings? And then the 6th part would be reporting, and continuing to read research, but really reporting it, because others have to see what you're finding so that they can repeat those studies to make it more valid, or apply them to their practice if they find, wow, look at all these studies that show that, more patients, we think their blood pressure is rise when they come to see the doctor because they are anxious. But when you really question the patient and find out their own meaning as to why their blood pressure is up, we can find out that they're not compliant and taking their medication. Look at the difference that variable alone, would have in the treatment. It's like, or somebody could just order more medication instead of finding out whether they're not consistently taking their medication they are. So that's why, using both is good. All right, that's all we're going to present on, research and quantitative and quality, and we're going to talk about them in class. The important things that we're going to do in class next week, is, instead of having you just read the papers on how to do critiquing of research articles, qualitative and quantitative, and doing them on your own and turning them in, I'd like to just do the readings in the book, look at the papers that are up there on critiquing them. So that's going to be another really important part, because of missing class, is that you really look at those examples of the critiques and the forms I'm going to put up there that you actually will use in class when we critique the articles. So in class next week, we will critique a qualitative article together, and we will critique a quantitative article together. Then you just have to turn in that mutual critiques. So basically, as long as you show that you were processing and got it down on paper from what we were doing, and that you understood what we were doing in the process, you pretty much can get all the points from doing the critiques and learn how to learn while doing the process. But it is going to be important that you do, that you have listened to this PowerPoint, and understood, some of the differences in the types of research, and then when we go over the critiques and are looking for all the points, that you have a good understanding of it.